On what feels like a daily occurrence in my landscape photography gallery here in the Lake District, I'm continually asked questions by fellow photographers asking my advice and opinion on various different pieces of photographic gear. Now, if you follow my channel for any length of time, you'll know that talk of gear bores me to tears, but I was prompted to do this video because I was doing some research into a purchase I was making myself. This is a Nikon Z6iii. I've purchased this camera mainly as a video camera, but also a backup to my Z7 II. I hate buying camera equipment, and as a working professional, every piece of kit that I buy has to serve a purpose, so I really don't like parting with money. And like many of you who watch YouTube, I watched a significant amount of reviews on this camera before making a purchase. After watching these reviews, I was moved to make this video because some of the information I found in those reviews were really quite hilarious. Right, now don't worry folks, there is some photography in this video amongst my, I won't go as far as say ranting, but my discussion on gear in landscape photography, so do join me. Right, I'll try that again. Rudely interrupted by a plane flying over there about 50 metres above the lake. What a racket. Anyway, if you're new here, I'm a professional landscape photographer and gallery owner based in the Lake District, and a lot of the stuff I'll put in this video from the perspective of someone who's kind of working at the sharp end of things, I guess, in terms of actually selling my work both to people on the high street coming in my gallery and also commercial clients and that sort of thing. It'll probably differ a little bit from a lot of the stuff you see on this platform, maybe from a kind of tech reviewer angle, or more for people who are mainly focused on creating content, should we say. Now, I don't want to make this into a gear doesn't matter video, because that's not what I'm saying. There's definitely instances certainly in other types of photography, I would say, where gear very much does matter. Things like frames per second and autofocus and stuff like that. But from a landscape photographer's point of view, a lot of those things don't matter quite so much as you would think. But if you're going to get in the comments and say this camera or that camera matters for doing things like weddings and wildlife, I'm not disputing that. This is from a landscape photographer's perspective. Now, over the years, I've shot with a lot of different cameras of varying quality lenses. But what I'll hopefully show you in this video is that for the most part, I think people worry about this stuff far too much. So, gear. I hate talking about gear. If you've met me, you'll know that. I'm reluctant to say it's a problem, but maybe problem is the right word, in that gear has always been a massive thing in photography. There's huge importance placed on it by lots and lots of people for many different reasons. My own opinion is that it's mainly because photography is a male-dominated arena, and, you know, for better or worse, men tend to get focused on things, gear, equipment, whatever you want to call it, things that are measurable. And the reality in photography is that a lot of good photography, when you get to a high level in it, is not determined by measurable things. It's intangibles, and that makes a lot of people uncomfortable for the most part. It's why there's a huge amount of technical gear review based stuff on YouTube, is that it's easy to make. Basically, it's far easier to sit and do a video reading off a spec sheet than it is to go out and actually create a good picture. Of course, while I'm yattering away to the camera there's actually quite a nice scene in front of me here. I'm just going to get set up and grab a shot. I had no intention of doing any photography down here, but I'm not going to film a load of spiel around it. But yeah, if this is any good, here's a picture. So that right there is a case in point as to why making these videos can be an absolute pain in the arse. There was some really nice light going on there across the front of the Scawfells, and this lovely little thin bit of, like a ribbon of cloud being reflected in the water here. And basically, long story short, I missed it because I was too busy faffing about doing this video. I did get one set up and I took a shot, but I've probably missed the best light. I'm going to leave it there and see if I can get a shot. I went for a nice simple shot there of the reflected mountain, because this area here, I've shot here many times over the years, but the water level is now a little low and the foreground area is a bit cluttered, to be honest. And if I was going to try and do anything wide angle, it would feel a little bit forced here. But anyway, back to the discussion. Now, one thing that I always find interesting is that whenever I have discussions with other photographers, especially kind of leading pro photographers and serious amateurs who are really good, is that almost never crops up in discussion is gear. I mean, no one ever really sits there and has a discussion about dynamic range and this lens being better than that lens. It used to be more of a discussion years ago when there was a lot more variance with lenses and stuff, but now it's just accepted and a given that whatever you're shooting with in landscape, it's going to get the job done. And if you get to any kind of level in this, I mean, the type of gear that you're using is way down the list of importance versus the skills required to actually take good images. It's just not that important, to be honest. I see an awful lot of people coming into my shop and asking me an awful lot of questions about gear, which I find odd sometimes, because cameras right now are as good as they've ever been. And if you pick up any camera, any modern mirrorless camera for landscape photography, and you're going to be absolutely fine. For the most part, we're only interested in image quality. And as someone who sells big prints on a daily basis, all I'm really interested in is the image quality coming out of the camera of an acceptable standard. In my opinion, for landscape photography, image quality in full frame format hasn't really improved in probably over 10 years. That isn't really that much of an outlandish thing to say, to be honest, because I used to use a D810, which I'll put the date it came out, but I think it came out around 2015, something like that. So nearly 10 years old. I would still be using that camera if it hadn't started fogging up with condensation. The only reason I moved to a Z6iii was because of a mechanical fault. The image quality coming out of that, as you'll see on the screen here, I've got loads of images in my gallery that I took with that D810, and they're absolutely brilliant. 36 megapixels, great dynamic range, pair it with some really good glass, and for landscape photography, you're off to the races. That's a 9-10 years old camera. Really, I think the problem that a lot of camera brands are having now, and the reason they're having to drive the marketing so hard on, YouTube, for example, is that deep down they know that we've hit a bit of a plateau, to be honest, for landscape photography. Now, in other genres like wedding, sports and action, all those sort of things that tax the camera more for autofocus and frames per second, that's a different discussion. But for landscape photography specifically, the cold hard reality is that pretty much any gear past a certain price point, and I'd probably these days put that price point quite low, you can get great results if you know what you're doing. The most important thing for you is to get out there and apply the 6 inches between your ears. That's a boring thing to say, and it's not going to get loads of hits and views on YouTube. It's why I don't do many of these type of videos, but that is the reality. So I touched on the reviewing angle on YouTube, and for beginners coming into it, I think it is a little bit of a problem now, because those channels that have the biggest voices on this platform are largely ran by people who don't make a living from photography. We can all have the kind of discussion about, well, it's all photography related, so you're technically making money from photography. In my opinion, you're not. You're either making a living from producing photography that sells, or you're making content talking around photography. If you take that content away from those people, they're not making a living from photography. They're making a living from content related to photography. Those people don't take any images. You never see them. They probably wouldn't make any bones about that either. But if you're a beginner coming into this and you're being influenced by things like DP Review and the Northrops and people like that, just take some of that advice with a grain of salt, because I've often seen them parroting stuff like, I'm a professional photographer of many, they're not. They're nerds for the large part, making money, making reviews behind a desk and doing stupid tests like testing cameras at 51,000 ISO or taking a picture of a landscape that's 5 stops underexposed. If you're a landscape photographer and you're standing there taking single frames at 5 stops underexposed, unless you're bracketing, you're a bit of an idiot. So I've no sympathy for you. But we can all stress test cameras till the cows come home. But in any real world sense, a lot of that doesn't matter. You know, really, people should be focused more on actually getting a proper exposure of the scene rather than standing there and being lazy and shooting it way overexposed or way over underexposed and then crying about dynamic range and stuff like that. It's not relevant. Okay, I'm just going to film this bit after the fact. I'm going to cut in here amongst my manic rambling about cameras because the scene in front of me has dramatically changed. The cloud has started to break up and we've got this lovely ribbon of light back across the Scawfells. So what I'm doing is I'm just framing up a nice simple shot, about 50mm. I've got a case, polarizer and 10 stop on. It's rare I do a 10 stop, but because we've got that little thin ribbon of clouds just above the top of the mountain here, what I'm doing is just smoothing that out and giving it a, well, what's the word that everyone uses on here is ethereal. I hate using that word, but it does seem quite appropriate here actually, ethereal. So yeah, that's the look we're going for, and I'm just taking shots as the light's changing, and I'll pick the best one. I think I've already took the best one, to be honest, but it's a lovely scene this, and while it's not technically the most difficult shot in the world, it is a very nice one. So here it is. Okay, so how do I wrap this up? Well, I should say what motivated me to do this video. I'm actually in the process of buying a second body myself, a Nikon Z6iii, and it'll primarily be a video camera for me and act as a backup for stills. But doing a little bit of research, and it was quite interesting to watch some of the videos, and frankly some of the hysteria around the poor dynamic range performance of this camera. And then when you actually watch the videos, you know, a lot of the testing is in just situations that really in a real world use aren't relevant. Things like it gets banding at 51,000 ISO in video mode. I mean, who the hell is shooting video at 51,000 ISO? You know, if it's that dark, take a torch with you or something. And also for stills as well, you know, oh, it's got really poor dynamic range. It hasn't got poor dynamic range. It's got very good dynamic range. It's just that all these cameras now have got very good dynamic range. So I guess really the purpose of my message here, especially to beginners and people coming into this, let me just take another shot while that light's changing. The message is that really gear matters, but in a sense of having gear that works for your style of photography. Things like dynamic range and image quality should really be way down the bottom of your list in terms of making a buying choice. You should be really looking at, You know, for landscape photography, you want flexibility, good ergonomics, a camera that you can work with quickly under pressure. What I like to say with my equipment is that it gets out of the way, and that's the highest compliment I can give my gear, is that it allows me to just focus purely on, hopefully, taking great landscape images, and I'm not worrying about things like how to quickly set it up, or, you know, change some menu settings quickly, or is it going to be weatherproof, and all those things. But the other thing that you should obviously consider is having a good lens lineup and having lenses that suit the type of landscape photography that you want to do. But really, the reality is all these camera systems are going to provide you with that. So, as I say, to reiterate, image quality, dynamic range, those sort of things that are the big headline kind of tests that people do in these videos that end up being really, really big on YouTube, just take them with a grain of salt, really. Take it from someone who actually makes a living from landscape photography and not just talks about it. But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed my little rant about gear, if you can call it a rant. I don't do many videos like this, but yeah, just felt inspired to do so. Don't know why, maybe a bit bored, I don't know. But if I can't use this channel for stuff like that, then where can I? But anyway, keep liking and subscribing, and I'll see you on the next one.